I am Dr. LeGrand. If you are new here on the channel, we're going to be going over the secret to making ADHD supplements work for you. If you are new to this channel, hit the subscribe button. We talk about everything about ADHD tips and tricks, as well as things and ways to optimize your brain and help with focus. So the very first thing, we're going to dive right into switching over to the whiteboard here. All right. So switching over and talking about secret number one. So there's 3 secrets really when it comes to really using supplements working for your ADHD. Now, here's the problem, you guys. When people are using supplements, they're typically looking at, okay, let me try this. I read this online, so let me try it, see if it works. And they find that it doesn't work. Then they try something else. Soon they have a bucket full of different supplements that aren't quite working for them. And what they're going to need to do is to really, first thing, the secret number one is testing. So testing is critical when it comes to really looking at supplements working for you, specifically ADHD supplements. Now, what kind of testing am I talking about? Now, there's 3 ways that we can initially test for, and there's different samples here. So we can measure through blood, right? We can measure through urine, and then we could also measure through saliva. Okay. Now, there's definitely other ways, questionnaires, we can do brain scans, we can do all sorts of different stuff, but that is usually a good way to really get a more concrete of your test results as far as what we need to be testing for. So the first one, looking at blood. Now, there's a couple things that you can test for here that I think are important when it comes to seeing what supplements you should be taking. A big one is really to see if you have any deficiencies, such as iron deficiencies is a huge one for people with ADHD. So seeing if you need to supplement iron. Another big one would be if you need to also be supplementing something for mineral deficiencies, right? So minerals and vitamins, you can measure that through both urine and also blood. So this is talking about, like looking for like vitamin D, looking at B vitamins are huge ones for people with ADHD, is to see if you are deficient in these areas in the first place. Magnesium is another big one that it would be good to look at, as well as zinc. So when we're thinking about that, we're thinking, magnesium, vitamin D. And then I also mentioned another big one is, of course, checking for zinc is a huge one. Is ones that you should be testing for. Now, saliva, on the other hand, and blood, I'm running out of room here, you guys, is testing for hormones. Okay. So when we test for hormones, now you might not think of hormones. Well, when you're going to consider about taking supplements, well, there is certain supplements that can help with hormones. So this is testing for, testosterone. This is testing for cortisol. Now, cortisol is something that we specifically use from our adrenals. Okay. So cortisol is our energy booster. It's what helps us, it really kind of helps us determine if we're going to get up in the morning, if we're going to have energy throughout the day. So usually sometimes people with ADHD, especially adults with ADHD, will run into an issue eventually where they don't have energy when they're adults. They hit these crashes. Maybe as a kid you had energy, but as an adult, maybe you're starting to struggle with that. Or you're having an issue managing your stress and anxiety. 50% of people with ADHD typically will have anxiety issues as well. Well, guess what? Adrenals have a lot to do with that, because what it's dealing with is epinephrine and norepinephrine. Those are both stress hormones that help regulate that. Now, when we can use saliva, and you could also test it through blood, is to check those cortisol levels, okay? And also checking for progesterone, estrogen, testosterone levels, seeing if those are deficient. And there's definitely certain supplements you can be taking to helping managing those things, okay? So that's secret number one, is definitely doing testing. Secret number 2 is, guess what? It is timing. Now you're like, okay, Dr. LeGrand, what do you mean by timing? Well, this is the problem that I see a lot of times. Supplements take a lot more time than a medication does. Why? Because it's not as potent, but you're not going to deal with a lot of the side effects that come with medications, where supplements, it can take anywhere from 2 to 3 months before you start seeing changes. Okay, so 2 to 3 months is kind of the gold standard, I would say. 2 to 3 months is to give it about that time frame to see if there is a change. Now, if you don't see any changes, then typically that supplement is not working for you. You should be doing something different. The other thing is maybe also the first week or the first month or the first couple weeks, you start having bad symptoms like headaches. You're feeling more fatigued. You're feeling more distracted. You're having all these weird symptoms. Now, it doesn't mean it's not working. In fact, sometimes you'll have worse symptoms. Things will get worse before they get better. So that's another thing you have to keep in mind, is that sometimes things can get worse before they even get better. And the reason why this is happening is because you got to understand, when you are implementing a new supplement, especially after you've done run testing first, and you're implementing a new supplement, guess what? Your body chemistry is starting to adjust and change. And therefore, it is starting to detoxify a lot of times, getting rid of things. And that's why you can have headaches. Sometimes you can feel a little bit more tired or a little bit more moody, because your biochemistry is adjusting. It's adapting and adjusting because you're introducing something that the body needs and has not been there for a long time. Or it's what I call is waking up the sleeping giant, the big problem in your body that has been a problem most of your life, and you're finally waking it up because you've been deficient in this area so long, or it is trying to get something out of the body that is need to be getting out of the body for so long. Okay, so that's why things can get worse before better. So this is the biggest problem that people have, is when they're trying new supplements, like, ooh, I feel worse. Now, you always need to be checking with your doctor to make sure they're not symptoms that are critical that you probably need to stop something, because it could be an allergy, right? But a lot of cases, it's not. It's just your body, you need to get past through it. And so how long should you be waiting? Well, I would say at least 1 week, maybe 2, but usually 1 week wait, to see if those symptoms are persisting. But at the same time, if they are more critical, you do need to be checking with your doctor to see if it's something you need to be stopping altogether, not waiting that whole week. So this is something that I work with my clients and patients, is when I'm asking them, okay, how bad are the symptoms? Is it something you typically have? Are they, how bad are they? How long has it been going on? And this is something that I'm always assessing with my patients and clients. But usually that is very common when we are introducing new different types of treatment into the body. Think about also medications. Same thing. Medications can have bad symptoms, but sometimes you have to wait a couple weeks. Same thing goes with supplements, you guys. It doesn't necessarily mean it is the wrong supplement you're taking. It might be actually the right one. So it could be a good sign. It's like, okay, great. It's detoxifying the body. Things are adjusting as it needs to, and therefore you need to continue on forward. But then again, there's things you need to check with your doctor to make sure it's not the case of something worse than it needs to be. All right, so secret number 3 is retest. Retest is so critical that not a lot of doctors do this. I don't care if you're checking for iron, checking for minerals, checking for, different deficiencies throughout the body, which the other one I forgot to mention here, which you guys have heard me talk about this, is testing for neurotransmitters. See, I don't think I have enough room here, but usually we run that is tested with the urine. Okay. So neurotransmitters is also very important because guess what? People with ADHD tend to have usually low dopamine levels and low norepinephrine levels, but it's not always the case. Not always the case. And you've heard me talk about this before, is having low dopamine levels is not always the case with ADHD. Sometimes it can be also, you've mentioned me talk about this before, is PEA, phenylethylamine, okay? Or it could be L-tyrosine that's low, or L-dopa, which is before dopamine. Or it could be epinephrine and not norepinephrine, or it could be serotonin. So there's still a lot of things that could be out of balance. So why we need to retest is we need to make sure if it's working. Is this working or not? Is the labs that we actually spent all this money on, is it working? And we usually need to retest pretty frequently. When it comes to digestive, I usually like to test that stuff usually once a month or every 2 months. Neurotransmitters, I usually will test, every 6 months. So for neurotransmitters, every 6 months. Digestive, usually every 1 to 2 months, we'll retest. And then allergy test. So if you're going to look at allergy, so that's another one I forgot to mention. Allergy test, usually this is like every 1 to 2 years if you want to retest it. So for allergies, 1 to 2 years is when you should retest. Now, as far as when it comes to all the other minerals, so like iron that I mentioned, usually, especially if you really do have an iron deficiency, we're usually want to test this every 3 months. Okay. So there's definitely different tests depending. Now, if it's hormones, so like, for example, let's say you have a thyroid issue when we're testing hormones, and usually we test this for blood, that is also every 3 months. But when we first are initially, when you're working with your doctor, when you're first, especially if you have a thyroid issue and you're getting medicated, because usually you have to do that with, especially if you have hypo or hyperthyroidism, you test that initially once a month until you have fine-tuned the medication that you should be at. But when it comes to supplements, it will be the 3-month mark, okay, when we're implementing natural supplements that we need to implement. But that is the secret when it comes to really addressing ADHD supplements. When you're trying to use supplements to help with your ADHD, these are the 3 secrets, okay? And that is really critical when it comes to making sure that it's going to work for you. And you might be in a situation, it's like, well, okay, that's great. What are all these tests? What do I need to take? And, you know, what foods should I implement and what foods should I avoid? Well, I have a free guide in the description below. It's an ADHD guide that you can download that goes over the tests that I typically recommend, that you should be running with your doctor, and also what foods to implement and what foods to avoid, and other supplements that can help with your ADHD. So you download it in the description below if you have not already, and then subscribe to our channel if you have not. We talk everything about ADHD here, as well as ways to optimizing your brain, and you just click on the subscribe button, as well as hit the bell notification, because we do these live streams every week on Thursdays at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right, so now that's it for now. And I'll see you guys next time.